Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast, Season 4. Today I'm on with Aron Clymer. Aron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, great to be on here. Thanks for inviting me. Aron Clymer, I'm founder and CEO of DataClymer, and we help companies implement modern cloud data systems and solve all their data problems.
Awesome. So, Aron, tell us more about DataClymer. How did you get started with it?
Yeah, it's a long time coming, I would say. I've been in the enterprise software space for my whole career. The last half of it, I would say about 15 years or something, I've been in data warehousing, specifically in data and data solutions. And I was working in corporate America. I founded the data team at Salesforce and built that and ran that for about 8 years. Developed really a methodology around how I would do data in general. So basically enabling data-driven decisions across the company and solving the problem of not having enough data quickly to answer quick questions about the business to move on with strategy or daily decisions or whatever it is, by any employee, ideally. So, hopefully having everybody in your company making data-driven decisions. So solve that problem there, and did it again at another very different company in San Francisco called Pop Sugar, which was B2C and all ad-based revenue and just a different, not a B2B model like Salesforce. So I enjoyed that. And then I realized, I'd really, in 10 years between these two companies, I'd seen two companies. I'd seen two data warehouses, two implementations, two data sets. I wanted to see like 100. I wanted to feel like I was a true expert in the area. I wanted to really understand what was out there in terms of the modern cloud, the data stack, the data technology that's out there, because there was a lot of innovation happening for the past. This is 6-7 years ago, because I started DataClymer about 7 years ago now. And the modern cloud stack was just getting going. So I decided to form a consulting firm where I knew I could help dozens or hundreds of clients eventually through this journey to solve their data problems. And here we are today, and I'm just really excited to have done that. I do feel like now, I am a true expert. My company is a deep expert at this, and I just love it.
That's awesome. So, I'm curious, what's the difference between the data you're looking at a B2C company versus a B2B company?
Yeah, it's more about, yeah, data. The kind of data is very different, and the questions you're asking is really what it comes down to, right? The business you're in, the business questions you have, the kinds of things you need visibility into are just different. So in B2B, first of all, your customer base is a lot smaller, just in general, right? Because you're working with companies, not with people, and there's layers to your customer, right? You've got the company overall, you've got the department within the company you're working with, you've got the leadership in that department, maybe you've got employees. So the accounts are complicated, and so the definition of a customer is much more complicated than in B2C, where it's just you and me and we're customers. So it's a lot easier to think about the customer in a B2C. But you also have usually much higher volumes of data in B2C because you're dealing with a lot more customers in general. That's a generalization, right? But so there's, at a high level, those are two different things I can think of.
Yeah, it's also, I remember from my time in B2B at IBM, just thinking about the network of buyers that are included in the buying process. So at a B2B company, there's so many more people involved in a purchasing decision. And that makes it so much harder to know where to market at the right time and to whom.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The thing that is common though among all companies is if there's a product. Most companies have a product, whether it's a service like in my business, or it's an actual product you're selling. You want to understand how people are consuming that product, how your customers are consuming that product and using it, right? So product usage data, that's something that is pretty universal. One aspect of what you always want to measure and understand, in terms of how your customers are interacting with your product or service.
I'm curious, you started your own company. What was that process like? And why did you decide to take the leap?
Yeah, I was pretty surprised myself, actually, that I was so risk averse. It took me so long. I always thought of myself as more of an adventurous, risky person, but when it came down to brass tacks, I was taking my time. I finally talked myself into it when I just felt like my career was far enough along and I'd had enough experience um, in a variety of companies and as well as in data and analytics specifically, that I felt pretty confident that I could start the company myself and be a practitioner. I could do the work myself too. So I didn't have to hire a big team or even anybody really. I just started myself. So that all of those things came together really nicely. The final thing that fell in place was um, that there was I found an avenue just to start, whereas before it was all very theoretical, and when the opportunity presented itself, I just identified, oh, there's an actual opportunity for me to get started. And what that was I had built out a modern cloud data warehousing system for Pop Sugar. And one of the technology vendors that we used in that stack was a late stage startup out of the Bay Area as well. It was a business intelligence tool called Looker, and Looker was subsequently purchased by Google. Um, and now it's kind of Google's cloud BI tool. But at the time, it was 150 people. Uh, Again, startup. Poxsugar was a customer, but I was the buyer. And I had rolled it out to about 200 people at the company. We had democratized data to all the employees, if you will, to give them self-service access to data to answer questions on a day-to-day basis. And so I was very familiar with the tool. I really liked it, by the way, too. I just loved the approach they'd taken. It was very, very modern. And to this day, it's still very modern. There's other vendors out there that take a full cloud approach essentially, and just abstract away all the technical headaches and make it easy for an end user to ask questions of data. So I loved that. I'd had a ton of experience with legacy BI tools, which were very clunky, very hard to teach people how to use, still not very actually usable. The user experience was horrible. So long story short, I was very impressed with the tool. And it was just the right time for me to, when I realized I wanted to just see a lot of implementations and see a lot of different data sets, I realized I could go talk to my customer success manager and the sales or account executive at Looker that I had worked with for a year, and a bunch of other people that I had got to know over the last year and a half with them. And I said, I want to be a partner, right? I'm going to start a company. I'm going to implement your tool. I want to partner with you. Give me, introduce me to two or three customers who are struggling and are having problems, and it's not because of the technology. It's something else. So they did that, and I got my first client within 4 weeks. So it sounds easy, but then I had to actually do the work. But we were able to get to be successful with a few clients, and after about 4 or 5 months, I was able to generate enough revenue to hire my first employee, and just off I went. So it was all bootstrapped, and just grew it organically.
And what's your perspective on that? If to grow organically and bootstrap it versus to perhaps use, a startup accelerator. It's very hot these days for people to just use a larger organization. What's your take on that? Why didn't you go down that path?
I think first of all, it was services. So it's a little different in services, I think, to do that, although I probably could have figured that out. But the fact that I saw a path where I could bootstrap it, I wasn't in a huge hurry. I was more just wanted to experiment with my business model and see if it was going to work. Um, and I like the idea of just being in full control and not really having to answer to anybody about how I wanted to go about, starting this thing and running it. So I don't know, maybe it was, yeah, that's what I did. And that's how I was thinking in retrospect. It did work out. I'm glad now that we still don't have right now, at least major investors. Cause again, we can direct the company any way we want. We don't feel like we're beholden to certain amount of growth or whatever it is. So I do like being independent.
Did you ever have any, disputes or difficult moments while you were creating your company? Sort of what were the biggest challenges that you had to face?
There's a book out there. I'll direct people to that. It's called The Boutique. It was published 4 or 5 years ago, and it's all about growing and scaling a consulting firm specifically, or a professional services firm. Um, I only found the book last year, but in retrospect, I've been kind of following the process that this book lays out. And there's three stages the book identifies. There's the initial kind of growth stage, or founding stage, and there's the scale stage, and there's maybe an exit. But um, I I was able to grow it myself sort of just, I guess it was naturally working until I got to about 10 or 15 people. And then I started to scale myself out, right? I couldn't keep more than 10 or 15 people busy. Even, 10 was actually hard. 15 got to be very hard. I was working 24/7, 7 days a week kind of thing. And I knew that I needed to start being able to scale myself. And that meant delegating more and more what I'm doing to other folks, right? And continuing to delegate and build out a management layer, essentially. Um, and so, uh, again, all these stories, there's so much luck at the same time as opportunity that comes along, in your career, in your life. And I would have, I'm sure I would have at some point figured out exactly who I needed to hire next. I was always struggling. Do I need to hire sales next, or more, or a manager, for delivery maybe, or operations? Where do I sort of start to delegate myself? And and the opportunity presented itself again. So my COO now, Brian Albers, he had been my partner contact and one of my partners, and he reached out and said, um, "Hey, I see what you're doing, love what you're doing. I'd love to join you." And I said, "Well, I don't really need a partner, function in my small company right now." And he said, "No, not that. Operations. Let me be your operations." I said, "Oh, that'd be perfect. That's Then it all kind of fell in place in my head real quick. I'm like, "You're right. That would mean I don't have to do invoice anymore. That would mean invoicing. I would get help hiring. I would all these operational things I needed to do, and realized I could focus much more on delivery and sales if I could offload all my operations." And so that's how it started. And since then, just been able to hire an entire leadership team to we have a head of delivery, head of marketing, head of sales now, and operations. So I have now fully scaled myself. It feels like at this point, I really just focus on brand awareness, face of the company, customer success, and understanding major customer relationships, things like that.
I want to ask about the first couple of hires that you made. How did you decide on the individual? What were you looking for that, even the first hire?
Yeah, probably no matter what company anybody's starting, if you're bootstrapping it, you're leveraging your own network, right, for everything. And I leveraged my network for hiring, for sales. That's how I found quite a few of my first clients, was just going out and actually reconnecting with a bunch of Salesforce executives who had now gone off and started their own companies, or were CEOs of other companies now, or leaders at other companies, because Salesforce is just such a large, sort of training ground for executives, is one way to think about it. So anyway, but for hiring, I also had worked with folks, at Salesforce, and had reached out to some of the folks I really knew they were strong, already knew they were strong data engineers, knew they were great to work with. And so I found a few of those kind of folks and hired them. And the second thing I did to find more people was I was looking for. I had to be scrappy, right? And I couldn't afford, especially Bay Area prices for a senior data engineer. I couldn't afford that. So I would find people that were in data programs. So data certifications is what I'm trying to say, like certification programs. People are trying to switch careers and get into data from other areas, accounting, even sales, marketing, all sorts of areas, teaching, the military and so forth. And so that was great, because these certifications, people would go through 6 months of some training on a little bit of everything and become a generalist in data. And then I could teach them specifically the tools that we worked in, and get them up to speed to be more of a mid-level data engineer. And then from there, they were off to the races.
So there's got to be a lot of trust then in that first couple of employees, that because at a startup level, it could all fall over right away. So I guess, how did you encourage that trust?
Yeah, that's a good question. I I just kind of had to. I think there wasn't a choice there. I chose people that I thought were going to be trustworthy from the beginning, have consulting skills. Um, we'll all be aligned. We all think, enough of the same way, that we will be able to make sure a client is successful, kind of no matter what it takes. The qualities I was always looking for were perseverance and collaboration, um, kind of folks. That's just kind of consulting in a nutshell, anyway. We actually made those our company values later on, and so I think found those people that I could work with well, and I knew we're going to do a good job, and so it just happened. I don't think I ever had a big problem at all with trust with an employee or two-way trust. I was still involved with most projects too, although yeah, maybe at 10 people, yeah, I started to maybe I was just checking in, every few days, and my employees were doing most of the implementation. But yeah, I just that wasn't a huge problem or anything to overcome.
Okay, so you say you made company values. That's interesting. So at what point did you realize you needed to do that, and then how did you actually create like come up with those values?
Yeah, I sat down. This was about 3 years ago, so we were about maybe 20 to 30 people, somewhere in there, 25, and I think again, as soon as I kind of waited until we had this management layer, or we were starting to build a management layer and have more of a quote real company in place. I think then that's when I finally started to want to document some of the stuff and put together a little more of a formal, mission, vision, and values kind of statement, as well as a go-to-market strategy. And so I just sat down and thought, well, okay, kind of back to your question about who would you hire, who was your first hire and why'd you hire him? I was thinking about what qualities do I want in our culture? What qualities do I want in the people that are going to be part of this culture? Well, I want them to be, again, perseverant. I think that was so important. In consulting, if you can't figure out a problem today, it doesn't mean you just drop it and say, I can't figure it out. I don't know what to do. You keep going until you find the answer. I don't care what it takes, right? That's networking, talking to other people, research, training, but you got to find an answer to a client's problem. So perseverance was really important. Collaboration, I'm a big collaborator, always love working in collaborative environments. I wanted DataClymer to be very collaborative. So I just thought that was a really good value for people to live by. Trust and transparency, though, those are both values at the company. And we split them apart because they're slightly different. But transparency is all about just always just being transparent, telling the truth about what, whether it's good or bad or ugly or beautiful. That's always the best answer in life and in business. And then if you are transparent, that builds trust, right? And trust, to your earlier question, trust is so pervasive everywhere you go, not only in your employee and management relationships or peer-to-peer relationships at a company, but with your customers. Trust is so important. I mean, at Salesforce, trust was the number one value of the company, because Salesforce had to spearhead trust in the cloud. You know, data in the cloud. That was their bit. They spent 10 years convincing the world to trust their data in the cloud. So that's why trust was so important to them. But I also felt like super important for us as well, because we really needed client trust. And it's the same thing. Like, clients are hiring us. We're not cheap, and it's basically like hiring a data team and then trusting that we're going to implement, what we say we're going to implement and do it right the first time, which is what we say we'll do. So those are the big values. Diversity is another one. So I just sat down and again, I thought about who are the people I want to work with? What do I want them to be like? And came up with the values that way.
You want to tell the audience more about your service offerings, and where they can reach you?
The problem we're solving is uh, enabling, or the problem is not having data fast enough to answer questions at the speed of the business. So think about a leadership team, or really anybody at a company, just having a question. Hey, how many customers are like X? Or what's the lifetime value of our customer? Or in marketing, what's the ROI of this campaign today? Or what things are working, what's not? And being able if you can't answer that in the same day or in the same hour as you're asking the question, so you can get an answer, make a decision, and move on and improve the business, that's a problem. And in fact, if you can't make those decisions quickly, what happens is often most of those decisions get made without any kind of data, because it takes too long to get the data, and you got to make a decision and do something with your business. So it's that speed of decision making, or the lack thereof, that's the problem. So we solve that because we implement a modern cloud data stack, and if you do it right, you really centralize all the data you have in your company in one place. That's because you never know what question you're going to ask of the data. And if it's not all in the same place, it's going to take forever to get an answer. So it goes back to that speed question. That's why you want it all in the same place. I'll give you an example. Right now, I want to know from my, we use HubSpot as our CRM. So I want to know who are our top 10 customers, which I'm going to get most of that information from HubSpot. But I also want to know how many hours we billed against those customers, right? Those clients in the past year or lifetime or whatever it is. Well, that comes from another system, right? Harvest we use to track hours. So that's two different SaaS applications I'm using to run my company. There's about 20 or 30 others, as most companies have. And in fact, as you get larger, you've got 100 SaaS applications running your company. So all those are data sources, right? Your marketing apps are data sources as well, your email marketing, and so forth. So if I want to see my 360-degree view of my customer in a really quick, report or ad hoc just question, if I'm saying, hey, I wonder how many customers we have, what are our top 10 customers on the East Coast by number of hours that we've spent with them in the last 6 months. I could answer that self-service in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. I've got a great solution, right? So that's what we're providing as a data warehousing solution that is self-service for almost anybody, and helps people make daily decisions with data.
That's really cool. Yeah, I want to ask about the marketing side. So when you were first marketing your business, how did you develop sort of how you would go into market?
Yeah, so because I started with a partner, right, with Looker, I continued that strategy, and to this day, our partner channel is still it's being eclipsed by a direct channel, but it's still probably our biggest channel. And so that was the strategy, right? So we built up relationships with key partners. Um, Looker, Snowflake is our one of our key data warehouse partners, and Sigma is another BI tool, data platform as well, Matillion and so forth. These are all either data warehouses or ETL tools or BI tools, but what the point is, they all have to be put together to form a solution. So we partnered with best in class solutions out there, full cloud, next gen, very modern, and we would really, the only marketing we would do is partner marketing. So we would collaborate with them on webinars, case studies. But really, that channel, they're doing the heavy lifting on the sales and marketing end, really, right? So they're usually bringing us into leads that are already qualified and well along the way in the sales process, because that's when the conversation comes up of, oh, okay, if we implement this system, we need help. Who can help us? Partner will bring us in because they know we're trusted and we understand their technology and we're certified and trained and the whole thing. So for a long time, didn't need a lot of marketing. When we got to be about 20 people, I started to try to do more prospecting. And at first I thought it was marketing kind of campaigns. And later, I think I've been convinced it's more of the sales campaigns, but we would send out, do a lot of email and LinkedIn kind of prospecting. And I guess because it was more specifically prospecting, it wasn't just blanket brand awareness, let's say. But I did do that, hired somebody who could help me just do some basic marketing like that, marketing and sales, build a new website, things like that. And then it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that we hired our head of marketing, which is our first full-time marketing person. And he's hired several people since then. So now we're doing a wide gamut of marketing activities.
Yeah, I love that. So you grew into marketing. You didn't sort of rely on it as a crutch when you were starting. You used it as an expansion measure.
I basically had to think through the whole go-to-market strategy. I'd put that together myself, and then I'd put together all the collateral. I did it all myself for years and years. So did all that basic stuff, but it was all through the partner channel and all specifically for partner marketing. Same thing with sales. So sales, that was our sales channel.
Last question before we get to the second section is how, as a CEO, do you view your role? Are you main? It sounds like you're really a salesperson, whether you're selling an employee to work at the company and selling the vision of the future, or talking to a client and really being that salesperson, the closer almost. So is that how you sort of see your role?
Yeah, I'm not directly involved in the sales process, only occasionally now. So our sales team does all of the actual selling and closing. But yes, always be selling. So my job really now is brand awareness, and is customer relationships. So I want to maintain relationships with as many customers as I can, um, And that's not only to keep that relationship positive and ensure we have long-term relationships and long-term business, but also to get feedback and understand the market and understand where it's going and make sure we have the right fit for the market in general, and just really listen to our customers. So that's my main role, is actually, I'd say, listening to customers as well as brand awareness, and being the face of the company.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aaron. And for the viewers, we're now going to switch into the second portion of the podcast. So this is going to be on Apple Podcasts. It's going to be exclusively available there. So let's get started.